today, so please.
So I'm Chrissa.
Carissa, nice to meet you.
I'm Chrissa McFarlane, and I'm the founder and CEO of Patientory.
Excellent. Please.
Yeah, hi, Mark Clermont, CEO for Cecelia Health.
Yeah, hi, my name is Vitali. I'm a CEO and founder of PigPug Health.
And some of us you've met too many times.
Yes, that's why I said.
Jonathon Feit, co-founder and chief executive of Beyond Lucid Technologies.
Jonathan, let's stick with you, and kind of in a similar fashion. Let's talk about the moonshot that you're working on and the company, about a minute or two.
Sure. So Beyond Lucid Technologies is unusual in a couple ways. We've been around for a while. We figured out some of the unit economics of emergency medical services, and our objective is, at the highest level, to connect emergency responders with the ecosystems they serve. So obviously the goal, as the moonshot is called, is saving lives. My personal mission is actually to ensure that the responders themselves are empowered and safe, so that when they arrive on scene, they know who they're taking care of, and the information about whether it's a patient, a child, end-of-life medical order, a crash scene, et cetera. Any of these really acute encounters can be captured and conveyed in a way that, quite frankly, allows them to get their paperwork done faster, get that information handed off, and get back to their station so they can eat and rest and be ready to serve another day.
Fantastic. Vitali, PigPug. I'm intrigued by the name, so I'm curious to hear what's behind it all.
Yeah, we have mascot. We have mascot. It's a Guinea pig, and we also love pugs, and that's why we have this name.
Okay.
We are focused on the treatment of kids with attention deficit and autistic kids. That's why we have this funny name. And we work on AI, telemedicine, brain training platform for kids with attention deficit and autistic kids, and it's based on neurofeedback. It's a natural way to train your brain, and our moonshot is to convince parents with kids with attention deficit to stop taking drugs, Ritalin, Adderall, etc., etc.
Mark, thank you.
Yeah, Cecelia Health, we run a national virtual specialty clinic focused on chronic diseases, and what we do that's unique is we deploy those clinicians primarily in service of life sciences programs, so patient support programs for commercially available drugs, clinical trial adherence, and then of course within the traditional healthcare sector itself. It's remarkably effective mixing digital and human-based interactions. We seem to have figured out the relationship and building a longitudinal relationship, and somehow it makes a difference whereby 83% of patients 12 months later are still adherent to their therapy. So a pretty remarkable thing that we're onto.
Some good numbers. Clarissa, now that I know your name.
The right one, too.
Yeah, the right one, exactly.
So at Patientory, we're a global data analytics and patient engagement platform. We use emerging technologies such as blockchain to aggregate and secure data, as well as cryptocurrencies toward our users and patients in meeting their healthy goals and challenges.
So let's stick with you, right? Because on one side, blockchain and incentives, right? Replace that with databases and cash, right? Back kind of in the day. What are and maybe it's a leading question a little bit, but what do you want your partners or investors to know? Really behind the scenes, what do you do, and what key messages around it?
Yeah, I would around blockchain and.
Well, again, right? You kind of start off with some of these terms, and and some people, and again, I'm being very frank here, kind of eyes glaze over, and then you need to explain, right? Yeah. So, just if you're talking to an investor or partner, how do you really go down one more level?
Yeah, I would say, because we are on the cutting edge right now, right? And we see, new talks around Web3, the new internet. I would say, this is the future of healthcare. This is where interoperability is going. The premise of Web2 was to create, a lot of internet-based companies that drives value, and you have a lot of B2B transactions. And then now we see this push in the market to democratize the internet, right? This is the age where I can have my data, and I should be able to take that data that I generate on a daily basis and, share it with whomever I want, but also be able to be compensated for it. So the premise of that, without using, those buzzwords, is it's really the democratization of data ownership, being able, as individuals, it's 2022, we still don't own that data. Data as utility, to be able to unlock that information, understand what it means for me and my health in 5 and 10 years down the line. As I start to create more and more information about myself, I can start to see trends, possible predictive analytics around what diseases I may be, at risk for. But the underlying, value is the ability to have, someone mentioned earlier, that portability of information.
Let's briefly stick with you. Number one ask, maybe make that pretty quick, to your partners, potential investors.
Number one ask for us. Right now we're raising our seed round, but our number
Besides
one ask,
that, always be
our
raising,
number
right?
one,
Besides
always be raising as a startup entrepreneur. But my number one ask is, just go online, look at our company, Patientory.com, get involved, sign up. We send out newsletters. We're always, educating the market. We've been doing this, for the past couple of years now, because that's the biggest hurdle in adoption to new technology, is being able to educate and have our partners understand.
Thank you. Mark, messaging around to your partners, investors, and kind of the number one ask.
Well, kind of following on that thread, this new emergence of data liquidity, and we look at it as a new foundation of health, affords, how do you translate that into patient care? And with all these new technologies that are out there, one of the things we see, in fact, the preponderance we see, is just increasing levels of patient confusion and increasing levels of disconnectedness. These new data streams, data flows, and affords us the ability to have situational awareness. Where is somebody in their care journey? And so when we work with a patient, very often what we're working with is this underlying premise of, don't lose me. They may have been discharged from the ER. They may have been sent home as a clinical trial participant, and they just don't want to get lost. And they have questions that they don't have the answer to, and it's hard to re-engage back into a site, back into a PCP, back into the ER, et cetera, and they certainly don't want to end up back in the ER. And so they reach out, and there are tremendous, incredible programs available that provide access to players like Cecelia Health. And I think what we do is we know that it's a unique thing, recognizing that we can work with patients on their technical needs, their clinical, operational, clinical safety needs, emotional and mental health support, all, again, in service of these cardiometabolic disease states. And it's incredible work. It's the realization that you can straddle clinical trials, patient support programs sponsored by pharma, as well as the healthcare system, and fluidly help patients navigate all of it, because the reality is they're looking for help any way they can get it. They're not just solely looking for their PCP. So that's our underlying premise. We've been met with a lot of things. We call it the age of enlightenment, referring back to the Gartner thing. I think we've been in our trough of disillusionment. Maybe it's the nadir now. So our ask of partners is that you recognize this age of enlightenment. You need to have a human-to-human engagement. If you expect your engagement to be successful, digital tools, AI, are phenomenal. They are great at patient identification. They are great at helping us scale up these human-to-human based relationships. But you will not get there longitudinally if you don't have a patient relationship that is enduring. And if you mix that appropriately with these digital tool sets, you can really make a difference. And so that's our ask of our partners, is to realize that this is where we are in this evolution. And thank goodness we're finally here.
Well, we're definitely speaking the same language. At YourCoach, our logo is actually Hito, which means person, right? And person you can lean on. So we do believe in the power of individuals actually connecting and personalizing.
Yeah.
Vitali, off to you, kind of a key either misconception or other things that you want to clarify for partners or investors.
Yeah, one great guy said, think differently or think different. And my message to investors, just not to think only about the revenue. We are StartUpHealth, and we are health tech startups. And it's quite how to measure the revenue and outcome for an investor. For example, in our case, that if parent after 5-6 sessions came to us and saying that like it's completely different kid, what's going on, and this is our outcome. And message to investor is just think about the patients, think about the relation, think about the empathy, because health tech startups, as usual, founded by people with passion to help. And not only revenue should be the key criteria to invest or not to invest. For example, because if I hear from investor, like, what's your exit strategy, or like, what's your revenue right now? It's
They're just tricking you with that question.
yeah, like we are thinking about the kids, how to help, how to make the new feature for them, not about the revenue, because kids is one of the most important thing in our life. That's my message.
And the number one ask, sounds like, so we'll combine that.
Yep.
Thank you. Jonathon.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to sound a little money grubby after that last question.
Hey.
So I actually really love this question, so thank you for letting me, Eugene. So I was thinking a couple years ago, the San Francisco Chronicle quoted me as describing entrepreneurship as finding a way to survive until the market wants what you have to offer, which is like the one time I've talked to a journalist and been properly quoted. So I'm going to answer your second question first, if I may, as far as sort of what our ask is of partners. We actually like to ask them what their pain is. Because by the time most of our partners come to us, they have experienced something. I work in emergency response, as we talked about before. So to the degree that, for example, finding that a patient was resuscitated, and then later on it was found out that they wished they hadn't been. Right? Finding out that your community has children with special health needs who are engaged inappropriately, and maybe EMS arrived on scene, and the lights or the sirens actually made the situation worse because it was an inappropriate interaction. Finding out that your substance use problem in your community, where everybody who is a chronic substance user is known, are you properly engaging them to not just react to the fact that they keep overdosing, but by the time they come to us, they're starting to realize that they need to do something different. And even fundamentally, sometimes it's we're drowning in paper. I've actually had one of the largest trauma centers in the United States come to me and said they actually got dinged by the Joint Commission because they have too many unread paper patient care reports from ambulances, despite the fact that they have all this electronic infrastructure. So my conversation tends to be around what their pain is. Yep. The misconception, and I've, like I said, you and I have known each other a long time, I've been around for a minute, is this market is massive. My tagline for the ambulance business is that the siren is the soundtrack of the city. And cities are getting bigger, right? It's a global business. I have found over the years that most folks tend to believe that EMS is however it is in their backyard, which makes some sense, right? But I also learned in business school that if you have a big, hairy, expensive problem that people are willing to pay a lot to fix, someone's doing it. Yep. And it turns out in EMS in particular and in healthcare, that's not always the case, right? There are massive open spaces. I mean, Kurtz is doing one of them, right? These massive open spaces that are truly underserved. And so I tend to try to correct that misconception that these are really big industries that are eminently servable, profitably servable, and at the end of the day, the patients, the responders, and their ecosystem all benefit.
Jonathon, 1 or 2 sentences. If you had a magic wand 20 years from now?
Oh, wow.
Keep it short.
Honestly, 20 years from now, no car crashes.
All right.
And if there was something, people would, the folks who are arriving on scene would know exactly what had happened, not only to the vehicle, but to the people involved.
That was 7 sentences.
The semicolon.
In 95% of cases right now in the United States, if you have attention deficit, you will be prescribed medication. Sure. Magic wand that in 20 years, in 95% of cases, you will train your brain in nature way, and only 5%, like hard cases, you could use a medication.
Love it.
20 years we've solved for diabetes, we've solved for cardiovascular disease. and along the way have elegantly transitioned to that stage, along with other chronic diseases, oncology, et cetera. We're well on our way.
Clarissa, thank you.
20 years from now, the phone is the new hospital, and we've been able to prevent 95% of chronic diseases just by understanding our lifestyle.
I love the 95% being used. Let's also keep it short, and we got about 3 minutes left. Would love to kind of, we keep talking about the great stuff in the future, but we just had tough 2 years, and I think it's going to continue being just from everything from geopolitical climate, et cetera. What is kind of one key thing that you've learned as an entrepreneur in the last couple of years and so forth? And again, please keep it pretty short and for other entrepreneurs to just pick it up. Clarissa, let's start with you real quick.
Okay. Well, never stop talking to your customers. I've learned that it's especially as a product builder, it's so easy to be confined, to a 4x4 room, either coding or managing developers. But what I've learned is, at least every day, talk to a customer and understand their pain points.
Yeah, and in the process of speaking to patients and trial participants, recognize that they have been closed off in their rooms. They've been inundated with horrible messaging incessantly, and whether they're using their Instagram and other socials, becoming more and more impulsive in that process. We're helping them. We need to recognize that and help them re-engage with this new normal, and socialize, et cetera. Incorporate that into our own treatment plans.
Two messages. I'll try to be quick. It's first of all, train your brain.
Hashtag train your brain, right?
Yes.
That's it. Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
And don't give up.
Yeah. Love it.
So what we learned from the pandemic, we need to take care of our emergency responders. Yeah. I believe this is the second panel at this conference in which they've been mentioned. The first was a discussion about opioids. So to the degree that whether they are fire-based, whether they're EMS-based, we need to pay them what they're worth. We need to make sure they have time to sleep and to eat, ideally not have to get 2 or 3 jobs to support themselves. The unsung heroes of the last 2 years have been the people who have arrived in Tyvek, in people's homes, despite the heat and the weather, and they have lifted people up off the ground. And in addition to COVID, they're still dealing with all the other crises that were there, people driving 90 miles an hour on the road because there's fewer cars, and the mental and physical effects of being shut in. I hope we've learned some lesson that the lasting impact and the necessity of the folks who go to the crisis, and that by the next time something happens, we give them all the tools they need to take care of the communities and themselves. Excellent.
Well, thank you very much for spending this time and educating the audiences, never give up, right? So I'm going to take that a key. Thank you very much.